provided our instructions for the remote meetings. So as a preliminary matter, this is Dan Crossan, Chair of the Affordable Housing Trust. Please permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Kurt Williams.
Here.
Elizabeth Hayes.
Here.
Ed Prisby.
Here.
Bruce Spinney.
Here.
Dan Kusher.
Here.
Great. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Chris McGoldrick.
Here.
So we do have a couple additional panelists tonight, speakers. Maureen O'Hagan. Can you hear me, Maureen?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. Thanks, Maureen. Is Mark O'Hagan there as well?
I can hear you, yes.
Great. Thanks, Mark. So good evening. This open meeting of the Affordable Housing Trust is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. And as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted on the town's website at www.graftonmass.gov, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting of the Affordable Housing Trust, is convening by Zoom as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I share notes otherwise. Meeting business ground rules. We are now turning to the first item of the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for the effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I, the chair, will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold your name until your name is called. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in colloquy with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. For items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will forward public comment as follows. The chair will first read public comments, questions received in advance of the meeting, followed by real-time board and other applicant responses. Public comments during the meeting will be conducted through the chat feature in Zoom. The chair will read real-time comments, questions typed by computer participants in the chat feature, followed by real-time board applicant responses. Finally, each vote taken in the meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. So one point on that, I know we have a whole new set of members, and we all haven't been sworn in, or many of us haven't been sworn in. So I'm not sure how much we'll be voting on minutes, but we'll take that in turn. So first item I wanted to cover was I wanted to welcome our new trust members, and Bruce, I want to apologize. I was been super busy at work, as we were talking about earlier, and I missed the last select board meeting. And so I was just notified yesterday that both yourself and Eric Swenson have been appointed to the trust rather, I'm sorry. So I just want to welcome the new trust members. I'm really happy to see this. This brings us back to full strength, back to a full committee. So I want to welcome Dan Kusher, Ed Prisby, Bruce Spinney, and Eric Swenson to the Grafton Affordable Housing Trust. A couple items just to get out of the way quickly, and this would be really for Kurt, Elizabeth, and myself. We have meeting minutes of the September 18th, 2019 Affordable Housing Trust and meeting minutes of the February 13th, 2020 Affordable Housing Trust that were provided earlier. So if you've had a chance to review them, I have. I'll take and accept the motion now to approve the minutes as they are now. From either you, from Elizabeth or from Kurt.
I move to accept the minutes from last meeting.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Kurt, you want to just second that?
Yep.
Hey, Kurt, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, I second.
Okay, great. Hearing none, I'm just gonna do this by roll call. Hayes,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
motion passes. And just a note, Kurt and I have been working on the minutes. This is really for some of the folks that, that pay attention and that go to our website and look at our meeting materials. There is some gaps, but a lot of that was because we hadn't either met or we didn't have quorum, which is exciting. Again, why I'm noting the fact that it's exciting to have all you folks on board. So Kurt and I have been working on it. We've got a little project to kind of tie that up. We want to be as transparent as possible and make sure nothing is being missed and it's all on the website. So we're gonna try to wrap that up by the fall. So with that, what I'd kind of like to do, because I think emergency rental assistance is our biggest topic item of the evening. It's extremely important. I wanted to take a couple of the discussion items out of order because I think that the comments on could be relatively brief and they're not going to be a lengthy discussion items. So I just wanted to kind of let everyone know, and most of you know this, but just kind of make sure we're all up to speed on what's happening with Pine Street. So I think you all were kind of following what's happening with the development there and the acceptance of the proposal from GSX. Certainly, Ed would know this well from being on the select board. So the sale was approved at town meeting. Ed, if there's anything you want to add to that? I mean, it's obviously, I don't think the P&S has been signed yet.
The purchase and sale hasn't been signed yet. We just approved it last night. It's fairly straightforward. I think the only major contingency is there's going to be an environmental examination done by the purchaser. And those are always big outs, right? So if they find any subsurface conditions that they don't like, they can walk away from the property. So, fingers crossed and knock on wood that they don't find anything that is going to cause them any concern. But we're still very much in that space where they can pull out. The proposed closing date, I believe, is June 21st of 2021. But it's going to be late June of 2021. So we got about a year to go before we get there.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. It's not a done deal. It's not chiseled in stone. It could be a huge help to our SHI, and it's, they are probably the right developer for that location and what they're doing. And more for Dan and others who just come on, like working with these developers is a part of what we do and what our strategic initiative should be when we can work with them to bring in affordable housing. And thankfully, the nice thing about the GSX one so far, they didn't need any money from us. So we'll see how that goes. And that leaves us with some reserves to handle other things and possibly development down in Fisherville Mill, which could be exciting. So there's not much more to talk about. I'm sure Ed's going to be saying it, and we can bring that back in future meetings. And as it develops, if we need to have these developers come in and talk to us about what they're doing, just so we have a sense about it, it might be we could have them come back in the future and join our meetings. I do also want to talk quickly about Worcester Street. So as most of you all know now, through a citizen's petition brought forward by our new trustee at Frisbee, it was approved at town meeting so that the land on Worcester Street is going to be transferred to the Affordable Housing Trust. I've been on the trust for 6 years. When I came on the trust, there was a lot of talk about Worcester Street coming to the trust and having something done there. So it's actually kind of a remarkable turn. I was at the town meeting. I was waiting to hear if there's negative comments. I was getting ready to walk up to the microphone, but I kind of gauged it and said, we're good. I think this is going to happen. And it's an exciting development. I'm going to let Ed talk a little bit about it too, because he kind of drove the ship on this and getting it done. But it's going to mean that, I think when we get through this emergency rental assistance program, getting this up and running and moving, there's a real opportunity to get an RFP out there, and it's a great opportunity to do something potentially for 55 and older, senior citizens, that kind of thing. I think there's a lot of ideas we could have there. But Ed, do you want to talk about that briefly? Just kind of give us a clue what you think.
Sure. I have, for those of you who don't know me, I had spent time on this trust starting back in 2012, and I did 3 years, and I chaired this committee for 2 of them. And in all candor, I didn't know what I was doing. And I think at the time, we had a group of really well-meaning people on board who were also just sort of trying to feel our way around this. And the one project that we had really proposed and we're trying to get town-owned land from was on, what was that, Sunset, or I forget the name of the street, but it was 2 units. I mean, it was a small 1 acre, maybe a half an acre lot of land that it turns out you couldn't develop anyway. But we got just such immense pushback from that neighborhood over that particular proposal that I think it really scared a lot of people away. I mean, we were trying to work with CHAPA on it. We were trying to work with Habitat for Humanity on it. And I specifically remember the Habitat for Humanity representative coming out of the meeting that we had with the select board on it, looking like he was scared. And from that point on, we sort of, we were trying to get a win, and we were trying to do it without upsetting anybody. And I will suggest to you that you can't do that with affordable housing. You're never going to create affordable housing without upsetting somebody. So as the years have gone on, since I was on the board, obviously the housing crisis has gotten worse. Housing costs have skyrocketed. The baby boomer generation has gotten older, and it's gotten much, much harder to age in Massachusetts and be able to pay for your medical care and your food. So the situation has only become more urgent. So to be honest with you, the thought behind it was, why not? Why not ask? You miss 1,000% of the shots that you don't take. So given COVID, and given, I think, how many people realize how they're only one paycheck away from being in an emergent situation, I think the conversation around affordable housing has changed. And it's different than it was a decade ago, which I'm grateful for. And at the same time, too, we've got enormous resources that we can call upon now. The Mass Housing Partnership is fantastic. There are a lot of developers who now specialize in the development of senior living housing and senior affordable housing. And there are a lot of organizations that we can call on for help. So the first step is the most important one. So I just thought I would get the ball rolling and see what we could do about getting some land in this particular plot of land that would be relatively easy to develop, given that it's got utilities and resources already there. We weren't having to create anything or create water, sewer, or bring electric to someplace that didn't already have it. So I too was expecting neighborhood pushback. We didn't get any. And that's not to say that we won't get some. We haven't proposed anything yet. And I think that'll happen when there's a proposal, but I'm excited that the mood in the community seems to have shifted in favor of being able to help people out.
Great. That's great, Ed. I would concur with that. I mean, I was here back, then I came on, a year or two after you started, and it was it was really the pushback we got on it on every conversation was there, and it was hard. And now I'm finding that there's people reaching out saying, hey, how can we do this? How can we include you? And even the developers we talked to around Pine Street, there was another developer who would be a great fit for doing something else in town, maybe with maybe Fisherville, and they had a really modern, progressive perspective on development around affordable housing and historic preservation. And it was like, I was like, this is, as the conversation was, I was hearing them talk, I said, this would be a great organization to bring back to us for, like I said, like Fisherville. So yeah, that's great to see it. I think we're gonna, we got something to sink our teeth into. I think if we take the right steps and work it out, it could work really well for that neighborhood. And I obviously there's always going to be someone who's going to say, we don't, this is wrong. We don't want to do it. But I think the town wants to. And I think even beyond the Affordable Housing Trust, I think there's people in town government who are saying, what are we doing cutting the grass there? We need to take that piece of land and do something with it. I'll just say this, for the other folks who are newbies, I was born here. And that's always been a plot of land. And my beard's pretty gray. So that tells you something about that. I've been driving by that as a kid, going to the school up at North Street. It's an empty lot. You could see where they used to drive in and for the old high school. So it's kind of exciting. I'm really, I applaud you for putting that forward, and it'll give us something to really sink our teeth in and get to work to. So with that said, I want to, unless there's anyone has any further comments or discussion on Worcester Street. There's nothing there's no motion or anything we have to pass. There's really just to kind of keep people informed.
Dan, just if I may, just one thing. So just to let everybody know where we stand on this, Jeannie Creamer, who is the town attorney, is drafting up the deed to deed the land from the town to the trust. Since the vote from the town has already been taken, all we need to do is present that deed to the select board and have someone sign it. Then it can be recorded. Then we can move forward.
Okay. That's great. So what do you think, Ed? A few 2 to 3 months?
I wouldn't even think that much. I think that, town council does not have a whole heck of a lot to do, and you can draft a deed in about 20 minutes. So heck, I'll do it if she doesn't have time to do it. But yeah, I would think by next month we could take care of that.
That's exciting. Wonderful, Ed. Yeah, just keep us, I'm sure you'll keep us informed, and it's gonna be great. So I want to jump into our main topic, and we do have some panelists here. And I just want to kind of brief everybody where we're at. I mean, I've talked to Ed. I went to a select board meeting. We talked a lot about affordable housing, and actually, I've been hearing affordable housing a lot. And at that, I would just say at the town meeting, I heard it more than I've ever heard it, which was exciting. But on the topic of rental assistance, this started percolating probably late April. I mean, I'm sitting right here, and I started getting emails from Joanne Duncan and folks saying, "Hey, listen, the CPA is going to be at these meetings. We're doing these things, and we're concerned." So I went to some Zoom meetings that were part. It was MHP and Chapel were part of it. Kind of like learn what is rental assistance, how does it work, what does it mean. We all know that there is some degree of protection right now. There's a moratorium on evictions, but that's going to end soon. By my estimate, and I think Ed sharpened his pencil on this pretty clearly at the board meeting I attended, and we're pretty close to the same idea about what you could be looking at in terms of like what it would cost to finance this and what would have to happen, just based on the numbers of people that we do have that kind of hide. Grafton's a pretty affluent town, but there's a lot of hidden numbers, and we don't necessarily always see this, but there's a considerable number of people that are at or below the poverty line. And even if they're at 100% AMI, they're, as Ed said, they're one paycheck away from being in a real emergency situation. So we decided that we needed to move forward, get this going, and get started, and kind of piecing it together. Which is another reason why I'm excited that we have a full committee, because it's something new. We've never done it before. The CPA approached me. So the funding sources for this, you can use CPA money, you can use trust money. A lot of our trust money is CPA, comes from the CPA. So we decided, okay, we need to put a project together. We need to get this going, but we don't know how to do this. We've never done it. We really need an agency to kind of help us, beyond identifying all of our funding sources, like how do we get this off the ground, and how do we manage it? Because we're a volunteer group of people. We all have full-time jobs, and there are organizations out there that sort of specialize in affordable housing and in these kind of initiatives, and helping us, do it correctly, keep it transparent and fair, and do it the right way. And it doesn't mean that there's not a number of decisions we're going to have to make, but so we wanted to try to locate some folks to help us with. I talked to Chris as our town planner, and he had some great recommendations. So I did reach out to a few people, playing phone tags with some, but our panelists tonight did get right back to me, and I do like the fact that they are local, and they have developed a rental assistance program and are with one town and have one pretty close to go. So I think it's Arlington Stowe. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to invite them in so we could, have a conversation so we understand what our next steps are, how we do it, how is it administered, how is it run, what do we need to do. My goal here would be, and I think maybe it was a little aggressive, was to try to get something up and running in August. The reason for that is because the provisions to protect people from eviction are going to be ending soon, and we need to have something up and running by September 1st. That's the goal. With that being said, I'm going to introduce Maureen O'Hagan and Mark O'Hagan from MCU Housing Services, who are our guest panelists to talk about rental assistance. So Maureen, I'm going to yield the floor to you.
I'm going to let Mark talk first. Mark has been kind of the lead in working with the towns to get the funding and Mark, by the way, is my brother. He owns MCO Housing Services and MCO and Associates. I'm more involved in the implementation of the program. So I think Mark would be the better person to start off this conversation. We currently are working with Arlington and Stowe, definitely. We have a couple of other proposals out there. Each town we're working with or proposing, the guidelines are different. So it really is going to come down to how you want it to work, and Mark can get into those details. Mark?
Yeah. Hi. So really, I think the key thing is, as Maureen was alluding to, is some towns have established different limits. You've got limits in terms of the population that you're dealing with. Most towns are focused strictly on people that are doing rentals. We do have one town that we're working with now that is considering opening it up to homeowners and deed restricted homes as well, because they can certainly have the same issues. We have one town that's targeted to people at 50% of the median income, another town at 80, and another town at 100. So, that's something certainly for the board to consider, is what income level do you really want to focus your efforts on? The second aspect is how much you want to provide in terms of support. Again, we've got a range of income levels, that not of income levels, but in terms of how high or what percentage of rent they would support for a given applicant. A lot of people kind of seems to settle in at about 70%. That they're looking to provide a contribution. Stowe is making the landlord actually provide 15% as a discount, and 15% from the applicant, and then 70% from the trust. And I think a lot of it becomes a function of how many resources you have, how many people you think are going to be in need, and how you want to distribute that money. Again, most communities are targeting 3 months support is what they've been doing thus far. And it can be anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 a month that they're willing to cover. So the numbers add up pretty quick. In Arlington, they've got 300,000. Stowe is doing 300,000. We're working with Canton, and they've only got 52,000. So they think they might only be helping 6 or 7 families, but they're going up to a relatively high level. So that key aspect that I think for consideration for the town is A, what's the population that you want to target in terms of the level of income? B, how much support? I guess B is really what level of resources do you have available? And how far do you want to spread that out? You can work it out so people get $500 a month or $1,000 a month and help 50 people, or they can get $2,000 a month and you help 25 people. The implementation of it, is relatively straightforward. Again, depending on the resources, some towns are doing a lottery, kind of a pre-lottery to rank people. Some towns are just doing it on a first come, first serve, again, which is driven by the resources that they have. So, we've developed applications in conjunction with them, and the information that we require to qualify them, for them to show that their income has dropped because of COVID, to verify that they're below whatever the income level that you have is, and just that they've got the right number of people, and we work with them to get W-9s from the landlord. So the funding will typically go directly to the landlord. I should say it always goes directly to the landlord. It doesn't go to the applicant, and then hope that it goes to the landlord. So we coordinate, we get a W-9 from them, approve the overall package, and then in some cases, they're actually transferring the funds to us. Most cases, we'll send them the approved packet, and then the town themselves would release the funds to the landlords. And they're really working it through up until the point that the funds have been depleted.
Hey, so Mark, this is Dan. I've got a question on the conversation with the landlords to contribute 15%. Who handled that? Was it Stowe, I believe?
That is Stowe. I think it's a little more of a unique situation. They've got, it's a pretty small town, as you guys may know. They've got one good-sized property that is substantially affordable, that's owned by the community builders. And community builders stepped in and said, we'd be willing to reduce it. They think that 80-90% of the people that are going to be getting the support is probably going to be at that property. So I wouldn't say that that's the norm, but that's the situation in Stowe. So it's more of a captive audience, a large nonprofit with significant resources that could help support the program.
Okay, I could see that could be a real deterrent to moving people forward if you're getting hung up in that kind of conversation.
Exactly. I think in a broad-based outreach to with a high number of landlords, we would agree.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions at this point? Anyone from the trust?
Bruce has his hand up. Yeah.
Bruce?
Mark, you just mentioned outreach.
Yeah.
What type of services do you guys provide to actually make sure we get everywhere we can? Because typically the town resources for actually outreach are fairly limited.
Yeah.
How many people we actually get to?
Yeah, a lot of the outreach has been focused on, obviously it's very local because of the local support, and it's only dealing with the town's residents. So they're reaching out through school department with emails, posting it on the town website. I think they're posting it on things like Nextdoor, putting information up in local facilities, talking with the local newspaper, and trying to get ads placed to, not ads or stories, so that people see that the funds are available. So it's usually, the outreach has been relatively focused, 2 or 3 weeks, to try to get outreach. Oftentimes, there's a good amount of chatter amongst the community because it needs to go through an approval process to get the resources done. So, I mean, in Stowe, it's taken them 2.5, 3 months from when the local, their housing trust approved it, by the time that they got to town meeting, which they needed their endorsement and approval to get the funds released. So, so there's been a lot of ongoing discussion from that sense. In Arlington, they did about a 2-week outreach where the town was focused on it. Their initial outreach, we got, I think, 50 to 60 people that were in the initial lottery that they ranked. And, we're now, going through and working with those people to get all the necessary information and make sure that they're qualified before any funds are going to be distributed.
And is it anyone else have any questions? Elizabeth or Kurt?
If you don't mind, a quick question for Mark. Mark, could we make a determination about how we are going to figure out who's getting the money, whether it be through a lottery or through first come, first serve, after we start to get an idea of how many people that we're going to get?
No, I think you need to make that decision up front. People need to know if they're going to be in a lottery or if it's first come, first serve. So like I said, I think a big function of it will be based on how much money you have. You know, Grafton is a pretty big town. I know there's a good number of rentals that are in the town. So my guess is that you probably want to look at a lottery basis. For the lottery in Acton, in Arlington, it was really kind of a self-certifying thing. You think you qualified, very, very brief application to submit. The town essentially accepted everybody. And then, once they got people ranked, because they were fearful that they wouldn't get to serve everybody. They wanted the lottery was really to rank people, 1 through 50. So they got that's their order to get the opportunity to run out of money. If they ran out of money at the 40th person, then the people below would be a waiting list if more resources were available. So again, I think likely a function of resources, but given the size of the town, my initial feeling would be that you'd want to have a pre-lottery that, again, everybody pretty much was accepted. But it lets you rank the people and deal with them in an organized fashion.
So Mark, I had a question regarding so right now we would be looking at using our funds that come from the CPA. But I know there's state funds, there's other options out there, like RAFT, that really targets people at 30 to 50% AMI. Have any of these towns you worked with been using that or employing that first, and have they done it through you at all?
Yeah, a lot of it has either been CPA. I think Arlington is using community development block grant funds from HUD, that it's available to them as well. The one thing that has pretty much been universal is that if people are getting other subsidies, whether it's Section 8 or RAFT or those types of funds, then they weren't eligible for the program. So they were really looking for people that met the income limits, that were paying the full freight on their rent and weren't subsidized in another fashion. But most of the money for the local communities has been through CPA or other funds that they source locally. I know the state came out with, I think, about $20 million a week or two ago, and exactly how that's being distributed to communities, or if it's being distributed to communities, I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. Yeah, because it just seems like we should be throwing everything we can at it. My concern is that we spend the CPA money. Obviously this is very worthy, but given the economic situation we're in, we're not guaranteed to get it all back. And so if there's other resources out there, that's what I would want to do or make available. That's one thing I was wondering about. I did note a couple of towns, I think it was Westboro, had their rental assistance program is basically directing everybody to RAFT, and that was it. And I'm like, I know that doesn't cover 70% of the people who might need help, but
I think the RAFT, the limit on RAFT is like $4,000 max. That's all they can get.
For like a 3-month period of time, or
no, my understanding is the RAFT subsidy is $4,000 flat. That's it.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
Mr. Chair?
Yep. I yield to Bruce.
Yeah, so switching from your rental assistance program, you mentioned a little bit in your discussion about mortgage relief as well. Is there any substantive difference in the program that we have to roll out to switch between the two sides of it?
No, what the requirement that they had was that they had to be deed restricted property. And meet the income guidelines. Was the same standard that they'd meet 70% of the mortgage payment, but that was the extent of it. The review was essentially the same, to verify income, verify loss of income or impact due to COVID. And that was the basis of the qualification. So we, instead of getting a copy of their lease, we'd get a copy of their mortgage. We'd get, a W-9 from the lender, and the funds would be directed towards them.
And is there any latitude to talk to the bank about discounts on their mortgage or deferring some of their mortgage? We provide assistance. So
I think that would go into some of the same conversations that we had previously, with the Stowe program. They've got a very captive landlord that is a nonprofit. I think trying to get into negotiations with mortgage companies and whoever has the current mortgage would be extremely difficult and cumbersome. I don't think that it would be. I don't think we could, that you could really justify the time it would take to get them to make some type of an exception and be able to get it done in a practical time frame, would be my opinion.
Yeah, and Bruce, I would just say from the mortgage side, from where that's where I reside, most lenders are doing what they can to provide forbearance. Fannie Mae, and I assume Freddie Mac as well, have some specific guidance for lenders as to how they're to treat folks who are coming in and looking for forbearance. So, that's obviously not something that would be a universal conversation with everyone, but I would say most lenders are doing what they can and offering 2 to 3 month forbearance for people who can demonstrate loss of income.
I guess what I've been trying to say is, providing assistance is just not necessarily cutting a check. There's a lot of advice that perhaps we can provide. If we're going to reach out to people and bring them in, it may be that we can provide more of an assistance in a way of telling them, what resources are actually available to them through different state funding mechanisms, being able to, handle a conversation with their mortgage provider, things that, instead of just bringing them in, do you qualify? Here's your $2,000 a month. We're going to help you out for 3 months, but actually providing the people who can provide advice, sound advice.
Sure.
And if we have to pay for that too, to provide consultants or people who are professionals in the field, or to provide them with a network that they can connect to, that should be part of this program.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we can only manage to give them assistance for 3 months, it's not necessarily going to bring them out of the woods. In most cases, it's probably not going to bring them out of the woods, and we got to make sure we can equip people with the ability to handle the 3 to 6 month range. Because we have about $1 million in the bank, even if we committed all of it. There's a lot of rental properties in town that could probably use the help, and especially if we open it up to the mortgage side of things as well. So we can blow through that fairly quickly.
I would agree. Yeah, I mean, we do have to definitely set some timelines, and you're right. 3 months, it's a help, but it's 3 months goes pretty quick. So that's great. It's a great comment. What else is out there? What else can we do that's educational that we can put out there and let people know what other aid and what other resources are there. I think that's something we should definitely take into account. Mm-hmm. So does anyone have any other specific questions for Mark or Maureen?
Yep.
Go ahead, Dan.
Sure. Kurt, you have a question?
Yeah, but Dan was ahead of me. He had his hand up.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I didn't see the handshake. Dan, you're up.
Yeah. So my question is regarding the timeline. If we use funds that we already have that don't need to get that are not new CPA funds that we don't need to go to town meeting for, what is kind of the soonest we can get this up and advertise and start accepting applications?
I mean, so Dan, the money's available. We don't have to go to town meeting. We have,
right,
a substantial amount of money. So we don't, it's up to us. It's, so I guess I'd say that, that'd be the next question to Mark, is say, what are the tasks that we need to complete so that we could have something up and running within 30 days?
Sure. I think the main thing is again, making a decision on the amount of resources that you want to contribute, making a decision on the income level of the population you want to support, whether it is just rental or rental and homeowners, and what level of contribution, what's the maximum, level of contribution. If you do look at 70%, for example, what's the maximum, rent that you would support? Could be 2,000, 2,500, whatever that number. Then we can kind of work backwards. You get a tangible sense of how many people you're going to be able to support. And again, I think you'd still want to do a pre-lottery. Once we have that information, we could put together an information packet very quickly. At this point, we're really modifying documents that we have in-house. So we could get those, turned around in a matter of days for you guys to review, approve, and then outreach could be started. Outreach, you're going to want it to be minimum of 2 weeks. I wouldn't go much more than that. If you did 2 to 3 weeks of outreach for people to apply for a pre-mortgage with a very simple application, then we can start focusing on working with those people. Getting the initial application in is easy. They don't need to provide a whole bunch of information. But there is financial documentation that we need to get to make sure we can show, the impact from COVID. We can show that they meet that standard. We get a tax return, we get a pay stub. So that takes longer. So from when we have people recognized that are in the program, we're finding it's taking another couple of weeks to get the information from them that we need and be able to, work through decisions. So I think 30 days is realistic. If, over the next 2 weeks, we could focus in on those critical issues in terms of decision making, and we can get the materials in place and then start getting ready for outreach. So it can be relatively straightforward if you already have access to the funds. That's been the sticking point in some other communities.
Okay, I have my own ideas on some of these as well, on some of those key factors already. So, I mean, I don't want to belabor this. I'm trying to get us moving. I'm not going to press us to have take a vote or make a final decision, but I'd like to just get everyone else's thoughts here on, I don't know if I'd get into the dollar amount. I think the other things, income level, rental versus homeowner, and match level of contribution, I think are going to dictate how much we're going to do the budget for it.
Right.
So, I mean, initially I was thinking this was maybe we go up to 100% AMI, but I'm not sure. I'd like to kind of open. I hadn't really considered outside of deed restricted properties. I wasn't considering anything on the homeowner side. I wasn't even sure if we would go down that road. So I'd like to open that up to the other trust members right now to see if anyone has any thoughts on that. Try to get the conversation started. Anyone?
Kurt, were you going to say something?
My question was around timelines as well. So Dan pretty much covered it there.
Elizabeth, did you have something?
I was thinking, what about, would there be a possibility of us creating some sort of like a Grafton Strong type fund where people could donate money into it on an ongoing basis as kind of a parallel to this? So if we have a structure already set up to screen people who do have the money, who are doing okay for themselves, might want to, get in and help their neighbors out. This could be an opportunity.
I think that has a lot of. I'm sorry, Bruce. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just moving to the mute button. I don't think you can actually see me when I'm raising my hand. So you want
I
me
can't. I'm trying to play with this thing here. So you're good.
Can you see me now?
Yeah.
All right. I love Elizabeth's idea because I think we have mechanisms to take in donation money, and if we have properly and professionally rolled out like experience for people coming in. We can show people in town who are more fortunate than others that, hey, this is an actual legitimate way to help your neighbor get by. It's confidential. We have the funding mechanism and the way to actually kind of bring money in and send money out and show people what we're actually spending that money on. I think it'd be a great idea. I just had a question real quick for Mark. Dan's talking about the alacrity by which we can roll out a program. If we make decisions, can we backdate it anyways? So if it's taking us a month to roll out and people are actually challenged now, we have the ability to retroactively provide funding.
I think what you want to, I think in the information, you want to target the time frame that the focus is. And I think you can go retroactively.
Okay.
The question is, do you waiting to see if people, haven't paid their rent or falling behind? Where it goes to the landlord, I think if it's retroactive, if you are helping people that were able to find a way to pay their rent, then that funding that you provide, where it's going to the landlord could actually kind of roll forward as well. Meaning if you're saying it's from May through, May, June, July, for example, people were able to pay May, but June and July, they had a problem. And, we're in August now. If 3 months of support is going on behalf of the tenant to the landlord, then they'd be crediting it what the back rent and then going forward as well. So I do think that, yes, you can target it to a specific time frame. That time frame can go backwards from where we are now, and we would kind of focus the dates that we want to see information, financial information from that around those time frames. But the short answer would be yes.
Chair?
Yeah.
If I could just speak to the time frame issue as well. I think that the moratorium on evictions is going to expire on August 13th. So functionally speaking, if you're going to have people who have fallen behind in rent payment and a landlord is prepared to send out a 14-day notice to quit for failure to pay rent, that's going to bring them to having to pay up for however many months they've missed come the end of August. So if, as this crisis has gone on, people have fallen behind, and we can set a timeline of, say, July, August, September, and block off those 3 months, then by the time a landlord is moving to summary process action for eviction, perhaps in early September, then at least an applicant can walk in with a rent check and clear that up, and that'll buy them some additional time.
I think some of the timing too, where there's going to be a big effect, is the unemployment bonus that runs out the end of July, and I think there's a lot of people that are living off that extra funding, and it's driving a lot of their decisions. It's driving some people not to rush back into work because they're actually making more money. But I think when those resources run out, I think we'll have a better sense of how big of a problem we really have, quite frankly, because there's a lot of people right now that are being covered by that. But come the end of this month, I think we're going to see some a lot more people in need personally. But
Okay, Bruce?
I apologize that I didn't have like a big list of questions to go through, and I'm kind of taking this piecemeal. And please stop me if there's something that's in a meeting packet that I missed that I can just go back and look at, so I'm not wasting people's times. This money that we give out to the general public, of course, it's a grant, so it doesn't have to be paid back. For tax purposes, how does this count? Is this something that next year we're going to have to provide some type of information for when they do this? Because it's going to be counted as some type of income, I imagine, right?
We get a W-9 from the landlord. So a 1099 would have to be issued to the landlord at the end of the year. So that's where the tax component would catch up. The landlord, instead of getting it from a tenant, is getting it from the town. They sign off. They give us a W-9. You give them a 1099 at the end of the year.
Okay. Is that something that your outfit handles?
We're doing it for some towns. Again, it really, whoever is distributing it will handle it. So if you want us to distribute the funds, they'd be transferred to MCO, then we'd get the W-9, we'd pay the money to them, and we'd give them the 1099. If the town is paying the funding directly, then we're going to get the W-9, and the town would issue the 1099 itself.
Right. And I don't know, perhaps I missed this in your opening, but what would our relationship like the trust and the MCO be? Do you guys collect a fee per dollar that goes out, or is there just a flat fee?
We put together a proposal based on it, depending on how many people. In some cases, we have kind of a base fee to get things up and running if it's a small program, and then we deal with it on a per applicant basis. So it can rough out to a percentage. Again, depending on the size of the program, there's time it takes to get things set up and do the work. If you're doing, hundreds of thousands, then, that's going to be spread over a lot more people. So we put together a specific proposal for you, but generally it would operate in on the per applicant basis is the driving figure, and generally around $400 per applicant, depending on the amount of resources that we're dealing with.
Okay. And do you have the infrastructure in place already? Because you talked about the applications and things that the general public is going to have to fill out. Do you have an online center where you can do that? Can you provide the information security for us?
Yep. Through our website now, and when you guys have a chance, go on to MCO Housing Services. We've got basically a button that says rental relief programs. You click that, you open it up, and we have tabs for the different towns that we're working with. On that, we've got the key program guidelines, and you can download an application. It's a fill-in PDF that they can fill it in, do an electronic signature, email it back, and they're up and running. And then obviously, if it is the full application, then they've got materials they need to send as well. But yeah, everything is dedicated there. We've set up emails dedicated towards rental relief, so it doesn't get muddled with our other work, and a separate phone line as well. So people that are calling in, we know it's dealing with the rental relief program because it's such a focused time frame. So we have people available to be focused on this, deal with the application specifically as they come in, and answer questions as they come in.
And you said it's generally about $400 per applicant?
Yeah, generally, depending on the scope of work that we're doing, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Yeah,
One more question.
Yep, sure.
Mark, could you just go over one more time the total amount of resources towns like Arlington and Acton are throwing at this?
Yes, Stowe just got $300,000 approved. Arlington did $300,000, and they have potentially more resources that they can put into it. Arlington again was dealing with 50% of median. Stowe is 80% of median. So again, it depends on who you're targeting. And Arlington's, they've said they could double that if they need to with other resources that they have. I think one of the decisions, if there's a question, I guess two things. Elizabeth's point about, a Grafton Strong or some private fundraising in addition to the town stuff. If you structure it as a lottery, you can just make it clear that, hey, these are the amount of resources are available. There may be more resources. So as people apply, even if the lottery is closed, we accept the other applications. They essentially become a waiting list. So if it turns out there's more resources that are created either privately or the trust decided to put more resources into it, you kind of have a ready list of people that you're dealing with to go through it. So that's how we're dealing with it in Acton, which I think makes a lot of sense. It gives you some flexibility. You can announce your program, announce the amount of money that you have that's being resourced. So everyone will have a sense of how many people are into it, but you can also advise them that there may be more resources available. So the lottery establishes a wait list, and people can continue to apply after the lottery date, and they just kind of go on the bottom of the list. And if more resources are available, they can have an opportunity to participate.
And Mr. Chair, just for my own edification, what do we have in the bank right now? About 1.5, 1.6?
Yeah, we've got about 700,000 in CPA money, and it's about, I think we have like 900,000 in from the Pulte funds.
Okay.
So it was a sizable amount, but you know, when we look at this and we think like, and I think that Mark, I think this has been really, really helpful, because the questions I had were, how are people doing this? What are they doing? What income levels are they setting it at? Because if you start saying, you know, you're a town like Grafton and we go up to 80% AMI, we easily could get to 300,000 or much higher than that, which would we, you know, we'll have to make a decision as a trust what we think is appropriate, but it may be more. I mean, we could be at 400,000. I think Ed and I both, and I maybe in a little more informal sense, but Ed really drilled into the numbers on this, and that's around the numbers that we came out with, and I think we're probably thinking a similar fashion, like in a higher income level. Bruce, did you have a question?
Yes, but Chris, of course, had his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to add to that. I do believe there is some funding through the CARES Act as well that we have earmarked for this purpose. So that may be additional monies that we could potentially supplement as additional if the program goes well, or used for a different but related service.
Okay, Dan, are you the field for Dan Kosher?
Do we know the like ballpark amount of that CARES money?
$100,000.
Amount of money.
Is there any? I'm sorry, Dan.
Bruce, I yield the floor to you.
So the CARES Act money is out there. If we're paying an application fee to a vendor, is there any way we can tie in CPC to this without going to town meeting floor to approve funds? I know there's some discretionary amounts in there that can be used for staffing purposes. Can that be used for this? Would this count as a staffing purpose under the guise of a CPA? If you don't know, it's fine.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure who that's to. Yeah, I mean, in my experience, if funds have been already allocated to the trust, it seems like it varies. Some places they have CPA funds that haven't been designated, and they need to go to town meeting and get those funds designated. What I thought I heard earlier was that some of the CPA funds had already been designated for the trust. Whether they're designated and there's strings attached of how they could be utilized, that's a local decision. And that I don't know.
We've always only gotten the reserve, the 10% mandatory amount from CPC. I don't think we've done a particular program. We'd have to, of course, wait till October to go back to them, which is a little late for the assistance that we're provided. But at the very least, we should reach out and say, we're going to expend, can you match our dollars, and go to town meeting and see if we can get some reimbursement. Dan, we have $700K in CPA funds, $900K in Pulte. The CPA money is more restrictive than the Pulte money, just for everybody's information, as far as what we can spend on other things. But we just portfolioed a fairly developable piece of land.
Right.
In our portfolio, as opposed to the town, is far, far more valuable. So for fairly short money, which we can exercise control of, we could get a nice development in place, get some engineering done, some site work done, do some preliminary permitting, which is very attractive for a developer. So although it's not worth X amount of dollars, because we can't really go and sell it per se, it's still far more valuable as our asset. So I just want to make sure if we're spending down money, we know that, yeah, we may be spending down cash, but we do have a portfolio behind us now. So
Yeah,
it means something.
I think that's it. That's a good point, Bruce. And it's important to, to sort of circle back and, this is our core mission is to build, grow, and develop and maintain affordable housing. This overlaps into this. We're not developing affordable housing, but we're keeping people in affordable housing. So we are maintaining it, which is important, but we don't want to lose sight of that when we have a war chest behind us that could dwindle very quickly. And to Bruce's point, Worcester Street is a great opportunity. It's a great asset, but that's not to say we wouldn't have to expend some money working with a developer on that, or other important developments that could come up, like in Fisherville Mill or elsewhere. So it's important to note that the money, once it's gone, it's not necessarily guaranteed it's going to come right back to us. We do have to, we might have to ask CPA, and we're in uncertain times. So, I like the idea of saying this is what we're doing. We want to see if you can match this and get a commitment, towards the October town meeting. We have to get started, but I think that's a great idea. Kind of think down the road. So Mark, in order for us to get a proposal, you need us to be able to come back and say, this is what we think the income level we want to work with. Do we want to work with rentals and homeowners or just rentals? And what are we thinking max level of contribution of rent? Plus and then also having an idea of how much money we're going to obviously budget for this. I think we'll know that when we kind of go into that. Is that what you would need from us to get a proposal going?
Yeah, with those components, then we'll get a sense of how many applicants we're going to be able to work with and spread some of the overhead across. So with that information, we could give you a firm proposal, yes.
Okay. Dan, I yield the floor to Dan.
I forget which document it was, but one of the documents that Dan sent out to us mentioned something about paying the difference between the full rent amount and 35% of household income. I imagine that would be some amount more complicated to use as a policy because there's a calculation to do. But would it be a lot more complicated, or would that just be something that's doable and that wouldn't delay anything?
I think that's where kind of the 70% number comes from. People, the argument if people are spending more than 30% of their income, then they're being overtaxed. So that's what people have looked at, saying, okay, let them pay 30 and we'll pay 70. If you say you want us to cover, a percentage of what their income is, we can calculate it. It's just harder. It's harder to project out in terms of who you're going to cover. Are you saying 65% of their income or 65% of their rent? I'm not quite sure exactly what you mean, I guess.
Yeah. So sorry. What I was reading in the document was saying that let's talk about rent. So the idea being that if somebody's spending more than 35% of their income on housing, that's considered it's kind of like a benchmark for spending too much. And we could, if we were to use that as our formula for determining how much to give people, then that would ensure that people are still paying in some amount, and it would be kind of fair in that perspective of everybody's paying 35% of their income and we're covering the rest of it. And maybe up to another cap.
I think, it would complicate it. It's not impossible, but if the bulk of the people, maybe they're spending between 35 and 50% of their income. So they're covering the majority of their rent. So on that basis, the subsidy would probably be relatively modest. If if they're making 48,000, they're making 4,000 a month. So 35% of that is 1,200 and their rent is, 1,800, then it's a $600 contribution. So it's not impossible. It becomes more complicated, but that would be at the discretion of the committee. So if that's something you wanted to do, we could do it. It'll be a little bit more time, probably be, somewhat reflected in the fee, just going through the extra stuff and getting down to really what their dollar value of income is, really specifically to make that calculation will be a little bit more time, but it's certainly viable if that's the decision, if that's what the board wanted to do. But a lot of people wouldn't need it on that basis is I guess my initial thoughts. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I guess what the place we're at now is that the trust needs to make some decisions, and I'm not sure we're ready tonight to do that. We got those 4 items, and the amount we're going to put in, which I think is all going to be determined by decisions around income level and mass contribution. We have a lot of information from our housing production plan that gives us a lot of insight into what the percentage of the population folks that could be impacted by this. I think that's where we start, and then that gives us the roadmap to say, how much do we need to spend in. But I'd like to try to, as quickly as possible, have that information available so we can get some kind of proposal out there and get that back and decide it. Does anyone have any thoughts? Sorry, go ahead.
Sure, if I may, I do sense, just for my own purposes, a certain amount of urgency on this. We can go through the housing production plan. We can look at how many people rent, the numbers of people that live at or below the poverty line. But at some point, we're just going to have to pick a number and kind of decide where we're going to go with this. I think the part that makes it difficult is if this was just rental assistance, we could easily just say, all right, 50% AMI, we're going to dedicate $200,000 to this, and we'll do the math and how many families we can take on. I think the hard part is, like we were talking about before, due to COVID, AMI is not completely beside the point, but there are going to be families that are living at 100% AMI that are going to be having trouble making their ends meet. So at some point, I think we're going to probably end up doing, my guess is, what Acton and Arlington have done, which is kind of split the baby on AMI, dedicate about $300,000 to this. If we get $100,000 back from the CARES Act, then that's only $200,000 out of the amount of money that we still have. I would really encourage us to go back to CPA. I was disappointed that they didn't throw in immediately in October and see if they'll match us dollar for dollar on the 100,000. So then at the end of the day, 3 months from now, we can say, well, we've still got 1.5 million in the bank. And then we're going to work with a developer on Worcester Street and whatever other projects that we have going on. I'm mindful that this crisis has been going on since March, and every month, people are falling further and further into crisis. So, I'm interested to hear what other people have to say. I don't want to overcomplicate our thinking and overthink it, when we could possibly vote on it tonight.
Dan.
So just a quick question with the AMI percentage, is that based on pre-COVID income, or is that based on income when they're applying?
Typically income when they're applying. So if they're qualified, people, we're presuming that their income has dropped because of the impact of COVID. So we're looking at their current income at that level as compared to pre.
Okay.
Right.
I think Elizabeth had a question too.
Elizabeth, you're up.
Hey, I was under the impression that CPC would backfill any money that we spent on this program.
I think so. My understanding is that's not necessarily a guarantee. I believe that needs town meeting vote was my understanding. And so in terms of the CARES Act too, I'm not prepared tonight to say that could be allocated to this definitively, but I believe it could be, but I don't want to say for certain.
Yeah, there's not necessarily a guarantee that would happen. We would have to, as Chris said, we'd have to go back to town meeting with that. But I don't think that's a bad ask, be prior to town meeting to be able to have that conversation. But as Ed sort of said, and I agree, I don't really want to overcomplicate this too much. It's happening. The crisis is going to start to become acute very quickly. So yeah, we could split hairs for a long time about it. But I just wanted to see and I know that we all necessarily can't vote per se because not everyone here has been sworn in. So that's the one complication we face. But I think pretty quickly we should be able to come to a conclusion about what those 4 items would be. I tend to agree with Ed. I mean, I've had 300,000 in my head almost since the beginning of this. And if the CARES Act money comes, that's great. That helps. That's fine. And will it all be spent before October? Maybe not. Probably not. But we may very well have an idea of how many people are coming in and active in the program to say, look, we're going to need some help. This is where we're at, and this is what we think is going to happen. We might need additional funding.
Dan, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Bruce.
I think just moving forward, it's probably safe to assume that we're going to be on our own as far as funding mechanisms. So, I mean, any CPA money that you might want to go after, CARES money, there's a lot of other things that the town is going to need. In CPA, we can always come back if we have an actual affordable housing project and make a pitch to them for that specific project anyways. So there's multiple avenues that we can go back to town meeting and kind of reimburse ourselves per se.
Yeah.
I have another question for Mark. Mark, do you seem that you've dealt with a couple of different towns to make our discussion process a little easier? Do you guys have like a worksheet that has like the main 4 points of decisions that need to be made? Because I know I can't vote on anything tonight because I haven't been sworn in. I'm not sure about Ed. But if we had some, worksheet that we could come back next week and we could all compare notes on or something to that effect, because you're going to know all these.
Yeah, I mean, I could put something together. I mean, just if you look at just some quick math, if you take a rent of $1,750, if you say that's an average rent, and you're going to pay 70% of it, that's $1,225 a month times 3 months. You're looking at $3,675 as a support for an average applicant. In $300,000 would get you roughly. That's 81 people. Obviously there's some administrative fees, so not quite that high. But, you can kind of look at it that way. And if you look at, if you did your, housing production, if you got a general sense of what the average rent is, then just by doing that math, you can work down and see how many households you're really able to help. So at $1,750, you're looking at probably, maybe 75 families, depending on what the range is. If you look at 2,000, it's going to be something lower. But that will give you a basis. That's how I don't know, when I kind of look at it of saying, how far are these resources going to go? If you want to put a cap on it, that people can get, $3,000 to $4,000, you can help that many more people. If you go up to $6,000, then paying $2,000 a month in rent for people, you're going to bring it down to 50 people. So to me, that is probably the most helpful mechanism as we've been going through and talking with different towns. I mean, you've got a sense of what the typical rent is out there. So use that as your basis to say, we've got this many resources. We know that this is generally what we're going to see for rent. So we can target it on that number, and put a max that's a little bit over because you're going to have some people under, and look at it in that sense would be, I found as a helpful means for, once people start, it gets confusing when you start talking about, $300,000. It's a lot of money in one sense. This board seems to have a very good sense that it doesn't go very far. So at $3,500 a people, it goes to about 70, 75 families. You want to do more or you want to do less, that kind of gives you a range of who you can help. So I could put together a little spreadsheet on those numbers, but that's effectively what the range would be, in my opinion. And the higher you go for the AMI, then it's likely you could bump into higher rents. So that's where sometimes, having a max to help people is beneficial to keep a broader base that you can support. So.
Kurt, did you have a question?
Just I think a comment probably, and this has been really informative. So thanks, Mark and Maureen, for going through it. I know just, in my relatively brief involvement here with this committee, we've been looking for, we always make note of the funds that are available to us and ways that we can, make an impact in the community. And to me, this is it's a great opportunity to make a significant impact. So one of the things I was wondering about is, as far as some of the limits that we would need to set in terms of like the total total contribution, whether that's 300,000 or whatever that number might be. If we did that, if we set things up and did that initial pre-lottery and had applicants come in with the existing parameters, I assume that if we felt like we needed to go back and add more, if we felt there was the need and we felt we had the means to do that based on the money that we have, there's a process to for us to be able to add more funds to the pot, so to speak. I guess that's a question for Mark as far as how that would work.
Yeah, I think that you can. Arlington has done just that. They think that they may have it. For them, it varies a little bit because it might be coming out of a different pot. So if it comes out of a different pot, they need to do a separate process for it. But if you say these are the resources, you have the means to distribute them, then we can just simply say that more funds may be added and people will go on a waiting list. That's how we're doing it in some other communities. So as long as it's clear in terms of the amount of funds that are available, how they're being distributed. If you want to add more, you can add more, and we just advise, put that information out there so people know and will continue to apply to the program, even though there may not be fund. It's not clear if there'll be funds available to them. You want to continue to encourage people to apply. If you get CARES funds, if you get local funds that are provided, we've got a waiting list to be able to help people. And even if we have a waiting list and for some reason you get the money from a different pot, we have a waiting list. You do a lottery of those people, reshuffles the decks, and then they're still in there. So the key thing is getting people into the system. Once we get them into the system, they know the funds are available. You do the best you can to help as many as you can. If you need to do more, if you need to do some more outreach, or you need to, do a second lottery because of the nature of it, you've got the people there, they're set to go, and it's a relatively, easy process to do it. So, adding, I think, is never a problem. If for some reason you take it away, that's a big problem. But additional resources, it's easy enough to find a fair way to distribute them and to keep people involved in the program.
Does anyone have any further questions for Mark?
I just, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
It was kind of covered, but I just didn't, I wanted to ask the question a little differently. Mark, are you aware of communities that are, obviously the affordable housing local funds are kind of allocated to the town. Are other communities doing things like a preference for landlords that are locally based rather than kind of companies out in other communities or other states in order to kind of keep that money allocated in the community?
Yeah, we haven't seen that. The overriding focus in the other communities is helping the tenants. So if the tenants are supported, then that's the key thing, as compared to focusing on who the landlords are. So that's been our experience. If other towns are doing it, it isn't anything. It hasn't been discussed in other communities, but that doesn't mean it isn't. Just hasn't been my experience. The tenants has been the focus. Local tenants, helping them stay in their homes and get over this financial hump that a lot of people are dealing with.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that makes sense. Anyone else? Any further questions for Mark? So, Mark, if you have some information you can send out to us. I mean, I think we have a pretty good idea what those 4 items are, but if you want to send something out, I think you probably have my email, and I'll distribute that out to the trust immediately.
Okay.
So for the trust, like, again, the one complication we have is that we have 4 new members. Our town clerk is on vacation this week. So, my understanding is that we're going to try to have a mass swearing in at some point. I don't know, or, I even have to be re-sworn in. So, but I think it would be imperative. I think we can hash this out pretty quickly, and get these, 3 to 4 items in place so that we can at least get the proposal from Mark, and then move on that by our August meeting. If and we might want to move some of that up too. That way, we're getting this off the ground and moving and in place, if not by the end of the month, by September 1st, the latest. Does anyone have any specific times are not available over the next week? Week and a half.
I'm available any night but Tuesday night. And I would encourage us, if we're not going to vote on this tonight, to come back next week and vote on it next week. Let's all get sworn in and get this rolling.
If not sooner, if possible.
Right. Yeah, that's just the one hang up. I reached out when they and again, I didn't know about Bruce and Eric, and then I checked. I said, "Is anyone sworn in?" And they're not sworn in yet. I'm like, okay, that's like the only complication. If that can happen this week or by beginning of next week, I got to feel like there's a way for us to do this.
Dan, you have a quorum here now. So your members present that have been sworn in, you have a quorum. If you want to get a sense of the board and move direction that way, it's perfectly acceptable. Ed's the select board rep. He doesn't even need to be sworn in anyways. So we've all gone through the process.
And to be clear, I have been sworn in.
Oh, you have? Excellent. Okay, great. Kurt?
Yeah, I'm wondering if we want to, the information that we're going to provide is ultimately to get this initial information packet put together, right? That would then come back to us for review. Is that right, Mark?
Yep.
Okay. So, to me, it seems like it probably makes sense for us we've got some numbers in mind, and it sounds like we're kind of able to flex that, rather quickly. It probably makes sense for us to, at least give an initial proposal on those numbers, the parameters there, and then see the initial information packet. And if we need to adjust, then we can, but that would at least get us on the road.
Yeah, and just, from our perspective too, we're happy to, put together I said, we've got the basic documentation put together. So we're not, recreating the world to give you an application package and the details that we would include based upon your information. So if you guys have a general sense of what it is, you don't need to take a formal vote. Give us some direction. We'll put it together based on that. If you get together next week when everybody's sworn in, and that's when you can officially approve things, hopefully by then, we've passed information around and you have something tangible to look at. We don't have a problem going ahead and doing work without a signed off proposal. We'll work in good faith. We're affordable housing advocates. So we want to help you. Obviously we want to get compensated and do the work. But we certainly don't have a problem putting together the initial information to help you guys make that decision and see what the impact is. Whether you vote on it tonight or not, just give us a general direction and we'll put that information together. And, if it's next week when you vote on it, you may have exactly what you need in front of you and say, hey, we're good to go. And, have your town put together a contract and we proceed. So don't worry about us having a specific authorization from you to do the initial work. We'll do that for you.
And with Dan being sworn in, we already, in Ed, we're already at quorum, with the rest of us, even if Bruce and Eric haven't. So we could do this at any time. We don't have to wait for, we actually, I didn't know that, Dan. So that's great. We don't need to wait a week and a half to get everybody sworn in and do that. And, and I think it's really just an idea of us getting a general sense about it and then forwarding it back. So Mark, if you want to send some information to me, unless anyone, if we feel like we have a direction right now, or if the trust members would like to wait and kind of hash these 4 things out and then get back to them. I have an idea on some of them, but if we want to
No
make
time
Chair?
like the present, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Right. Ed,
Yeah, I'm sorry, Bruce. What did you just say? I missed it.
I said there's no time like the present. August 16th is that
So
hard
here's,
time.
I just want to make this motion to the group then. I move that we direct MCO to provide us with a packet of materials that contemplates a $300,000 investment on our end for 80% AMI, capped at $2,000 per month per application over a 3-month period.
Second.
any further discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Dan.
I think 3 months is a good place to start, and 300,000 a good place to start. And I think we will likely end up considering extending that. I just don't see this crisis ending in 3 months. Well, actually, would Ed's motion include retroactive rent payments?
Yeah, so I was contemplating July 1st through July 1, August 1, September 1. So by that point, Dan, we'll get to the point where we're contemplating October town meeting warrant articles, and we'll be able to see what response to the program that we have. And if we need to go back for further funding and say, look, the crisis is where it is in late September. We're contemplating doing this for another 3 months. Can you get us another $300,000? That was my line of thinking.
So I think when did the eviction moratorium start? I thought that started late April, so that would be for the June rent payment.
Yeah, so it would cover May 1, June 1, July 1, and August 1. So people could be as far as 4 months behind now in rent.
And then September and October, by the time we get to October town meeting.
Right.
Any further discussion? Mr. Spinney?
I don't know if I don't want to nitpick too much, but I just want to, the source of funds, we do have 2 plots to draw from. Could you just amend the motion to go from our 700K in CPA funds?
Yeah, except that I don't know that MCO needs that information from us.
Well, fair enough. As long as everybody knows where the funds we're going to pull from first.
Yeah. Our money's green, MCO.
We trust you.
So
Go ahead,
I
Dan.
guess I wonder if we should make it longer than 3 months, just to cover anyone who's been behind since April or May. I don't know if anybody else is concerned about that. If it's just me, then never mind.
So I think what we've typically seen in the advice we got with Mass Housing Partnership in Chapin, most communities, and I'm not saying it was just copy what every other community does, we're doing it as a 3-month temporary assistance. I think but we're not completely bound by that. If we wanted to come back and extend it, I think that's within our purview to do it. I think I would be careful about going beyond 3 months at this point, not knowing exactly what we're going to get for additional funding and what the response is. But I would just say that to the trust that it's not chiseled in stone that we're only going to do this for 3 months. If this emergency became much worse than we thought, we could certainly look at extending it. I don't see anything that would compelling that would tell us why we couldn't do that.
Yeah, my concern is just that if we say it's 3 months now, when the eviction moratorium ends, in August, then anybody who's behind by more than June, July, August could be evicted at that point. So anybody who missed April or anybody who missed May, and then if we don't extend it before September, anybody who's been behind since June would be evicted in September. So I'm just concerned about that. I mean, we do have time to revisit it as well before that happens, but I don't think we would necessarily know anything more about additional funding by those points.
Yeah, it's kind of tough, Dan, because we don't know exactly, we don't know exactly what we know. We don't, the additional funding for the unemployment additional benefits are ending. So are people not paying? Are they banking money? Is the crisis going to hit them at that point? When is it starting? I mean, my suspicion is for many people, it's already there. It's already happening. Like, and your concern is admirable and noted. This is why we're doing this. But we're not sure what we're going to get hit with exactly. I'm taking the perspective that the worst is going to be, there's going to be many families, and it may be it may be like the thing. They're due to open May, June, they're already going to be behind. It could be getting letters from the landlords. So, but until we know, I don't know that I would extend it beyond. The severity of emerging, I think we can look at doing what we want to do. Mr. Spinney.
I actually, Elizabeth, I'm not sure if you can see her on your panelist view, but she's had her hand up for quite some time.
Elizabeth.
Yeah, there's a motion on the table, and I know that I think we should just kind of move along with this, seeing as how we can always change things as it goes on, and we can't start it off completely open-ended. So why don't we just use this as a starting point, and then as we get into it, we see how things go, then we can expand or contract or whatever as we see fit.
I'm good with that. So is there any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none.
Mr. Chair, just one thing. I did want to address Dan's point. I understand what you're saying. I think my only issue is unless we want to extend the $300,000 out, if you cap it at still at $2,000 a month, and say you go to 4 months instead of 3, you've limited the amount of families that you can help from 50 to 25. And it's not by no means is it a perfect solution. I would hope that if there are families that are in those situations where you suppose you are 4 months behind in rent, and all of a sudden, you show up at housing court at the end of August with $4,000 in hand and you owed $6,000, I would hope that whoever is on the other end of this would understand that, okay, here's $4,000, and they've got another $2,000 coming as of September 1st for that rent, and can we extend this out? It's been my experience as an attorney who sometimes does work in housing court that it does work out okay in those situations. But I think me personally, I would just rather catch 50 families than 25.
I agree. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to ask for a roll call. Hayes.
Haynes, aye.
Williams.
Williams, aye.
Kusher.
Kusher, aye.
Prisby.
You're muted.
Prisby, aye. Sorry.
Right. Bruce, you're not sworn in yet, but I don't need your vote.
I'd still like you to resonate my vote anyways for the record. So Spinney, aye. You can take it however you want. I just want to make sure that I'm part of this.
Okay, the motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mark, for all the help. So next, you'll be getting us a proposal, and what's the timeline on we should be expecting that on?
Within the next several days. So we'll get it out as quickly as we can. I'm going to be out of the office a good amount tomorrow, but we'll try to get it put together for by the end of Friday. So you guys can have it over the weekend and let us know sometime next week.
Okay.
But we'll get it out in the next couple days.
Okay, that sounds great. With that said, I mean, our normally, we meet the second Wednesday of every month when needed. But I think this is sort of pressing. I think when we get the proposal, we want to review it, try to vote on it as soon as possible to get it, to get this moving. I think Ed already mentioned that he's not unavailable on Tuesdays. So if we could have this by the weekend and come back with something for next week and be able to vote. Does anyone have any time they're restricted on next week other than Ed on Tuesday? I can send out a survey tomorrow morning just to find out, and then we can get something tentatively penciled in because I don't think this will be a long meeting, but just so we get it for the record. Does that sound good?
Mr. Chairman, just
to
I know some of the media outlets, cover some of the more higher up meetings like select board and school committee, but perhaps when you're setting this agenda, you could send it off to Jen Paluzzi, Grafton News, and some of the other correspondence people we have in town. Maybe they tune in because we'll be talking about some of the finer details next week, and that might be beneficial for everybody as part of our marketing campaign.
That's a great suggestion. Okay. Does anyone else have anything to bring before the trust? All right. I want to thank Maureen and Mark for their time tonight. I'm looking forward to seeing your proposal and the trust meeting again to move forward on that. So if nothing else, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
Wait.
Moved.
Oh,
so what?
All right, I got two things, procedural things, and I know the MCO people probably want to go home, so I don't have any more questions for them.
Terrific. All right. Thank you very much. It's great to meet everybody. We're looking forward to working with you. We'll get a proposal out in the next couple of days. Have a great night.
Thanks, Mark.
Bye.
So I got maybe 20, 25 more minutes of questions here for you. And I'm sure Ed wants to listen to them all. So trust accepting money. So I really like Elizabeth's idea of piggybacking that Grafton Strong type of thing. And I know the apparatus is in place for that. And perhaps Ed can bring that back to the board and maybe shift some of that to us or how they've been advertising and things like that. But I'm not sure the trust has a gift account in its own name. And I don't know the vehicle by which we take in money from private donors. I know we have a couple of different accounts set up with the accountant's office, and I don't think we actually have an accountant right now. So we might want to make sure we reach out to the town administrator's office and make sure we can actually handle some of that type of thing. And the CPA money that I was talking about is, I believe Joanne Duncan is paid via this. There's some staff money that's allocated. It's 5% of the overall budget that can be allocated by the CPC for staff purposes. If we're paying $400 per applicant to have staff run this particular program, that might be easy access to some dollars that maybe the CPC can provide if the rule set is in place for that. If they're expending it all on Joanne, then of course not, but maybe Joanne, who's doing some CPC work, and come and volunteer some work for us, especially on the marketing for Elizabeth's idea and some of the stuff that MCO won't be doing for us. And I touched on it briefly before, but just handing out checks is, I think we can do more than that with the resources that are available and at our disposal. And that could be something that Joanne could help us with too. So I don't know how that all fell out. I've been off the board for a while, and I've been off the trust for, almost a year now as well. So maybe there's some other organizational pieces in place. But at the last I thought Joanne was actually spending some hours at the CPC's expense. Because remember, Dan, like 2 or 3 years ago, we were going to pay $25,000 to have the planning office provide us with professional staff support, and I don't think that's actually come to fruition. but there should be money available for that, so we don't have to touch all of our funds to administer this particular program.
Yeah, I think we did use money for Rachel Benson years ago, I believe.
No,
Off the top
we
of my head.
gave authorization. I don't recall ever actually expending those dollars, but
Yeah,
we may
it's
have.
been 2 years.
That's how we paid Ann Morgan. Ann Morgan, I think Ann Morgan was the assistant town planner, and she got part of her salary was coming from CPA money.
Right.
And that's how that's how we afforded to have an assistant town planner in that office.
That's how I believe Joanne Duncan is being paid.
Right.
Because she came over from CPC, being on CPC, and she left and she does her staff work for her. So there might be a relationship there that we can leverage some hours for. But Ann never got paid out of the trust fund. That was Rachel, who came after Ann, and then they came specifically to us for a vote to expend some of those dollars. And we gave them the authorization. I just don't believe we actually spent it. At least not while I was treasurer. But we may have. But either way, there might be other ways that we can find CPC dollars to leverage against this program before town meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dan.
So with Joanne and the CPC money, they budget for more than they expect they'll use because they don't know how many hours she's going to devote to CPC versus select board. And they can't pay her to do select board work with CPC funds. So first of all, they have more than they're really expecting to pay her. And they have enough to set aside already for the full year. So I think it's definitely worth bringing it up with them to see if they can use some of that money now, and then at October, fill in whatever they need to pay Joanne for the rest of the year. Just an idea.
No, I think that's worth the ask.
No, that's all I had. Ed, sorry. Move to adjourn.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Do I have to do this by roll call? Bruce?
I'm not sworn in. I really want to go home, so I'll say yes. You can take my vote however you want.
Ed?
Aye.
Kurt?
Aye.
Elizabeth?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Meeting's adjourned. Thanks, everyone.